Okay, so today we are diving into a world that's not just technologically advanced,
Right.
but it's a world where technology has reshaped what it means to even be human. Aldous Huxley's Brave New World.
It's a world where it isn't just like technologically advanced, it's a world where technology has reshaped the very essence of what it means to be human.
Yeah,
You know?
totally. And believe me, it gets really wild. So to unpack this whole thing, we kind of have to start right at the beginning,
Yeah.
which is
Or should I say where the traditional beginning,
Hmm.
birth, is a thing of the past. Huxley throws us right into a world where babies aren't born, they're made.
Whoa. Hold on a second. This whole hatchery and conditioning center, it's blowing my mind a little bit. Can you imagine a world where family is just obsolete? It's fascinating and creepy at the same time.
It is. Huxley paints this really vivid picture of this facility. Rows and rows of these artificial wombs, and each one is meticulously calibrated to produce a very specific type of human.
It's giving very much no room for free will.
Yeah.
So how do they make sure everyone stays in their perfectly designed lane?
Through a process that Huxley calls hypnopedia, it's essentially sleep teaching. So, they're drip-feeding these beliefs and values while you were literally sleeping.
Wow.
Subliminal programming on steroids.
So it's not even just it's not just about what you're taught, it's what you're subtly programmed to just believe as a given. Your whole worldview is shaped before you even have a chance to open your eye.
Exactly. And it's not even just the content,
Right.
but it's the limitations that are placed on certain castes. Take
Yeah.
the lower castes, the deltas, the epsilons. They're intentionally stunted. Their intellectual and physical growth is manipulated to fit their preordained roles.
It's almost are we even talking about human beings at this point? Or are we talking about just cogs in a machine?
That's the question, right?
It's chilling.
Yeah.
And to top it all off, they plaster these seemingly positive words everywhere. Community, identity, stability. It's like a twisted marketing campaign for a dystopia.
And that's the brilliance of it. Huxley takes these concepts that we value, community, identity, stability, and he warps them into tools of control.
Wow.
Community becomes about erasing individuality. Identity is pre-assigned. Stability comes at the cost of freedom, creativity, even genuine human connection.
Yeah. It's they've bottled up a very specific version of happiness.
Yeah.
And they're just force feeding it to everyone.
Yeah.
And speaking of, we've got to talk about Lenina Crown. She's a product of this world, right? Living by its rules.
Completely. She embodies those values completely. She's beautiful, enjoys casual sex, and pops Soma like candy.
Oh, yeah.
Soma being the drug of choice, the
Yeah.
instant happiness pill. That just washes away any unpleasant feelings.
It's the ultimate escape.
Right.
The quick fix to any emotional hiccup. Which, let's be honest, this is something we grapple with even today.
Precisely.
Bro.
Think about how often we reach for distractions or quick fixes to numb out uncomfortable emotions. Social media, streaming services, even that extra glass of wine at the end of a long day. These are all, in a way, our versions of Soma.
It makes you think, are we any different from the citizens of the world state? Or are we just more subtle in our methods of self-medication?
It's a question worth pondering, but let's not forget about Bernard Marx. Here's a character who doesn't quite fit the mold. An alpha, yes, but plagued by these feelings of inadequacy.
He's like that glitch in the system. He's the one who can see the cracks in the facade.
Yes,
right?
yes.
He's yearning for something more, something real, even if he doesn't quite understand it himself.
He craves those deeper connections. He grapples with the idea of monogamy, concepts that are deemed outrageous in this pleasure-driven society.
And what's fascinating is Bernard's not alone.
Not at all.
Right. We're introduced to Helmholtz Watson, an Alpha Plus writer.
An Alpha Plus?
There are levels to this alpha thing.
Indeed. But even at the top, Helmholtz feels stifled. He yearns to use his words to express something true, something beyond the shallow propaganda that he's expected to churn out. He senses a disconnect between this manufactured reality and something else, something that he can't quite articulate.
It's like they both have this intuitive understanding that something is off. This picture-perfect happiness, it just feels wrong. And this is where things get really interesting. Because their journey is about to take them beyond the sterilized borders of the world state, to a place that is the complete opposite.
A place that will challenge everything they thought they knew about civilization, about happiness, about what it means to be human, a place called the Savage Reservation.
Ooh,
Yeah.
the Savage Reservation. Talk about a culture shock, right? It's like stepping into a time capsule.
Yeah.
A world that is completely untouched by the world state's version of progress.
And that's where we encounter John, the character who really throws a wrench into this whole system. He's grown up on the reservation, immersed in these rituals, traditions, even religion, all the things that the world state has deemed primitive and dangerous.
He's a living, breathing paradox, raised in this so-called savage environment. Yet he's deeply connected to beauty, to art, to spirituality.
Yeah.
All the things that the world state has eradicated in their quest for stability.
And that's what makes him such a powerful force.
Yeah.
John's very existence exposes these cracks in the world state's facade. He embodies everything that they've tried to eliminate: passion, love, faith, even suffering. And he doesn't shy away from any of it.
He's a walking, talking reminder of what it means to be truly human, right?
Yes.
With all of the messy, uncomfortable emotions that come with it. And you've got to admit there's something refreshing about that, even if it's a little unsettling.
Indeed. His presence in the world state is like a jolt to the system. He sees their casual relationships, their reliance on soma, as just empty and artificial. He is disgusted by their lack of genuine connection, their fear of aging and death, things that he views as just natural parts of the human experience.
Imagine that, being repulsed by somebody for, like, growing old. I mean, it throws our modern obsession with youth and beauty into a whole new light, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
John's perspective challenges us to question our own values. What if our pursuit of eternal youth and this kind of superficial happiness is actually hindering our ability to live fully, to embrace the complexities of life and death?
It's deep stuff. But let's not forget about Linda, John's mother. Now she's desperate to escape the reservation and return back to the world state, which is a stark contrast to John's rejection of it.
Her reaction underscores the enduring power of conditioning. Even after years of living outside of the world state, the values that were instilled in her, the allure of comfort and this instant gratification, they remain very deeply ingrained.
It's like she's still chasing that soma high, even though it represents a world that ultimately rejected her.
Yes. And her death becomes this pivotal moment for John. He's devastated seeing her die in this sterile hospital bed, surrounded by strangers, bombarded by this mindless entertainment. It's the antithesis of the meaningful, ritualistic death that he's accustomed to.
Yeah. You can feel the weight of that loss, that raw grief.
Oh, absolutely.
But you can tell it's fueling his anger, and it's kind of pushing him over the edge. He tries to wake the others up, make them see the emptiness of their existence. It's almost heartbreaking to witness, like watching someone just rage against an unyielding tide.
His actions, though, ultimately futile. They highlight the fragility of the world state's control. They can suppress emotions, but they can't completely eradicate the human capacity for love, for grief, for rage.
And just when you think John is about to blow the lid off this whole operation, he runs into a character that offers this chillingly logical counter-argument. The world controller, Mustafa Mond.
Mond is a fascinating character because he's not some power-hungry tyrant. In fact, he's intelligent, even contemplative. He understands the reasoning behind the world state's methods. He's made the conscious choice to prioritize stability and happiness, even if it means sacrificing freedom and genuine human experience.
It's like their conversations are like a philosophical chess match.
Right?
It's a battle between these two totally opposing worldviews.
Exactly.
And it's Mond's calm, calculated justification for the world state's methods.
Yes.
That is what makes it all the more chilling.
He argues that art, science, religion, all the things that the world state has deemed incompatible with their version of stability, ultimately lead to chaos, suffering. He believes that by eliminating these elements, they've achieved a kind of utopia, a world that is free from war, poverty, and emotional turmoil.
But at what cost?
Right.
I mean, John passionately argues that there's more to life than just being comfortable and content. He believes that truth, beauty, even suffering, these things are essential to the human experience. He says he'd rather live with the pain of freedom than the numbness of a manufactured happiness.
And that's the crux of their debate. A debate that has resonated with readers for generations. It forces us to confront our own assumptions about what constitutes a good life. Is it possible to achieve true happiness by simply eliminating all sources of discomfort and pain? Or does real joy come from embracing the full spectrum of human experience, the good, the bad, and the ugly?
Yeah, it's a question with no easy answers, and Huxley certainly doesn't offer any. But by presenting both sides of the argument, he forces us to grapple with these questions on a deeper level.
Yes, and as Jean's story unfolds, we see the devastating consequences of a world that's chosen to prioritize stability and happiness above all else.
And the ones who dare to question that reality, they often meet a rather unfortunate end, don't they?
Indeed. Bernard and Helmholtz. Despite their initial attraction to John's rebellious spirit, they find themselves increasingly at odds with the world state's suffocating control. Their intellectual curiosity, their desire for something more, marks them as threats to this carefully maintained order.
So what happens to them? Do they get silenced, reprogrammed, vaporized?
Their punishment is a bit more refined. They are exiled to islands, isolated communities, where their unconventional ideas are less likely to disrupt the status quo.
Exile. A fate potentially worse than death in a world that thrives on conformity. It's a clever tactic, really.
Yeah.
Instead of making them martyrs, the world state neutralizes them, shipping them off to these intellectual wastelands where their voices are effectively silenced.
And for Bernard and Helmholtz, this exile isn't entirely unwelcome. They see it as an opportunity, a chance to explore those parts of themselves that were stifled within the confines of the world state, to live authentically, even if it means living on the margins.
It's like they've been given this twisted gift, the gift of freedom disguised as punishment.
Indeed. But for John, there's no such escape. He's trapped, adrift in a world that seems determined to strip him of everything that he holds dear. His grief over his mother's death, his disillusionment with the world state's emptiness, it all becomes too much to bear.
And that's where things take a very dark turn, wouldn't you say?
Yes. John's story takes a tragic turn, one that exposes the brutal consequences of a world that refuses to acknowledge the full spectrum of human emotion.
So John's stuck. He's caught in this spiral. Grief and disillusionment, desperately looking for some kind of solace in a world that doesn't seem equipped to offer it.
He tries. He tries to escape to this derelict lighthouse, hoping he can find some kind of peace in isolation and self-inflicted penance. It's a desperate attempt to cling to the values of the reservation, to reclaim some semblance of the life he once knew.
So he's trying to purge himself of the world state's influence, to just whip himself clean of their seductive but empty promises.
But his efforts are totally in vain. You know, the world he sought to escape, it follows him, and it twists his pain into a spectacle.
Oh, wow. So they're exploiting his savagery for their own amusement, turning his grief into a reality show, basically.
Exactly. The media swarms. They're broadcasting his every move, transforming his desperate cries for meaning into a form of mass entertainment.
It's a horrifying thought, to have your pain, dissected and broadcasted for a society that thrives on superficiality.
It's a stark commentary on our own fascination with spectacle, our tendency to turn even tragedy into a form of entertainment. Huxley seems to be warning us that a world that's obsessed with pleasure and distraction risks losing its capacity for empathy and for understanding.
And John, he's pushed to the brink. And he cracks. It's heartbreaking, this descent into self-destruction.
Consumed by grief, manipulated by the masses, betrayed by a world that refuses to understand him. John ultimately takes his own life. It's a tragic end, one that leaves us grappling with the devastating consequences of a society that has sacrificed true human connection for the illusion of safety and happiness.
Wow. So is Huxley suggesting that any attempt to create a more stable, comfortable world is doomed to fail?
I think the message is much more nuanced than that. Brave New World isn't a simple condemnation of progress, or a plea to return to some, idealized past. It's a cautionary tale, a stark reminder of what we stand to lose when we prioritize comfort and control over freedom and genuine human connection.
So it's like that age-old question. Would you rather live in a cage where, all your needs are met, but you're denied true freedom? Or would you choose the wild unknown, the uncertainty, the pain, but also the exhilarating possibility of self-discovery and authentic connection? Huxley seems to be saying that a life without those things, a life that's stripped of its rough edges, it might be safe and comfortable, but is it truly a life worth living?
And that's the question Huxley leaves us with. He doesn't give us any easy answers, no clear-cut solutions. Instead, he forces us to confront these uncomfortable truths, to examine our own values, and to ask ourselves, what price are we willing to pay for a world that promises happiness at the expense of our humanity?
It's a lot to unpack, that's for sure. But I think that's the beauty of a good deep dive, right?
Absolutely.
It stays with you long after you finish listening. It makes you question things, it makes you reflect, and maybe even see the world around you with a fresh perspective. So, on that note, we'll leave you with this final thought. In a world that's constantly urging us to seek comfort, to chase fleeting pleasures, and to numb ourselves to any discomfort, how do we hold on to those things that make us truly human? The capacity for love and loss, for joy and sorrow, for connection and compassion. The answer, much like the world Huxley created, is complex, it's challenging, and ultimately, it's up to each of us to discover.